Long before the first empires rose or the first words were written, Earth belonged to giants. Towering beasts roamed the forests, skies, and seas. Creatures so massive that every step they took shook the ground beneath early humans' feet. Our ancestors weren't kings of this world, they were prey. Yet somehow, against the odds, small bands of fragile humans learned to hunt, adapt, and outthink the monsters that once ruled the earth. This is the Forgotten Age, when survival meant facing creatures beyond imagination, and when courage first defined what it meant to be human. In the beginning, humanity was anything but dominant. The earth was a stage ruled by titans, massive predators and creatures that dwarfed our fragile ancestors. The early humans were small, slow, and vulnerable without the claws, fangs, or armor that defined their competition. They existed at the very bottom of the food chain, forced to navigate a world where danger lurked in every shadow, where the sound of a branch snapping could mean death, and where every sunrise brought the same unspoken question: how long could they last? Imagine vast plains where the air trembled under the footsteps of giant mammoths and towering ground sloths, forests echoing with the growls of saber-toothed cats, and rivers patrolled by monstrous crocodiles. For early humans, life was not about conquering nature. It was about surviving it. Each day demanded vigilance. Each night demanded fire. They huddled together in small groups, their fires flickering weakly against the immense darkness around them. Those flames were more than warmth. They were a fragile barrier against a world that seemed determined to erase them. Unlike the beasts they faced, early humans had no physical advantage. They couldn't outrun the predators, couldn't overpower them, and couldn't hide forever. Their only chance lay in something invisible: awareness. Awareness of patterns, of movement, of sound. They began to read the world like a living language. The rustle of leaves was not random, it was a sign. The tracks in the mud told a story. The smell in the wind carried meaning. This deep sensitivity to the environment became their first form of intelligence, and it was born not from curiosity, but from fear. In a world dominated by power, fear became the teacher that shaped human evolution. The constant presence of danger carved instincts into their minds. Instincts to observe, to plan, and to anticipate. Each encounter with a predator forced them to think differently. A tribe that failed to adapt vanished. Those who learned passed their lessons forward not through words, but through action, through the art of survival. They learned to use tools not as weapons of conquest, but as shields against extinction. A sharpened stick was the difference between being hunted and living another day. The first humans were scavengers before they were hunters. They followed the giants, waiting for predators to finish their meals so they could take what was left. It was a dangerous game, but it forced them to watch the movements of creatures far stronger than themselves. Over time, observation became strategy. They learned how predators thought, how they stalked, how they struck. They learned the patterns of the herds, the weaknesses of the massive animals that ruled their world. Every piece of knowledge was survival currency. Fire was their revolution. It transformed the balance of power, allowing fragile humans to stand their ground. Predators feared it, and in that fear, humans found a small window of control. Around the flames, they began to share stories. Not stories for entertainment, but warnings and lessons. The story of the night something came out of the dark. The story of the one who didn't run fast enough. The story of the strange marks on the ground before the attack. These tales were memory turned into wisdom, and wisdom turned into survival. Hunting was not born from aggression, but from necessity. When food grew scarce and scavenging could no longer sustain them, early humans turned from observers to participants in nature's deadly game. But unlike the beasts, they didn't rely on brute force. They relied on cooperation. A single human was weak. A group, moving with purpose and coordination, became something new in the natural order. Together, they began to outsmart the giants. They developed signals, unspoken communication, shared instincts that would one day become the roots of language. Their minds evolved in unison with their courage. The early humans' greatest weapon was not their tools. It was their ability to imagine. They could see danger before it arrived. They could anticipate outcomes. In a world filled with chaos, this ability to think ahead, to create a mental picture of what might happen, was the thin line between life and death. That imagination, born from fear and necessity, became the seed of all future civilization. As centuries passed, humans grew bolder. They learned to track herds across vast distances, to work with the landscape rather than against it. They shaped stone into blades, wood into spears, and instincts into tactics. Every generation carried the scars and lessons of those before them, etched into their DNA and their memories. They learned which berries poisoned, which animals hunted at night, which winds carried the scent of danger. Each discovery was paid for in blood, and yet it pushed humanity closer to mastery of their brutal environment. But mastery was an illusion. Even as they adapted, they remained fragile. One mistake, one moment of carelessness, and they would be erased by a creature far stronger and faster. This constant tension, this ever-present reminder of their weakness, forged resilience in the human spirit. It was in that crucible of fear, hunger, and endless danger that the essence of humanity was formed. The refusal to give up, the instinct to fight back even when the odds seemed hopeless, and the quiet, burning awareness that survival itself was a form of victory. The dawn of intelligence did not arrive with a single spark. It emerged slowly, like the faint glow of fire in a world of darkness. For early humans, thought itself was born from necessity. Every decision carried weight. The wrong turn could lead into the jaws of a predator. The wrong sound could summon death. In this constant tension, the human mind began to evolve as a tool sharper than any stone. Instinct alone was not enough anymore. Survival demanded foresight, understanding, and a growing awareness of cause and effect. From fear came observation, from observation came memory, and from memory came thought. They began to notice patterns in the chaos. The world around them was no longer just noise and danger. It was a map of signs waiting to be read. They saw that certain birds flew away before a storm, that animal tracks led to water, that the moon's cycles changed the behavior of the tides and the beasts that followed them. This awareness was the first step toward mastery. To think was to predict, and to predict was to survive. Unlike the great predators who relied on brute strength, humans started building invisible weapons made of memory and reason. Fire was more than a discovery. It was a symbol of thought made real. It represented control over the uncontrollable. The first person who struck sparks from stone was not just lighting a flame. They were altering the balance of life on Earth. Around that fire, ideas were born. They learned that the flame could cook meat, drive away beasts, and harden wooden tools. They learned that knowledge itself could multiply, passed from one mind to another through imitation and gesture. A discovery that once belonged to one person could belong to an entire tribe by the next sunrise. This ability to share understanding marked the beginning of collective intelligence. With every generation, humans learned to store knowledge, not only in their minds, but in their behavior. The way they hunted, the way they moved, the way they guarded the young, all of it became refined through time. A child born into this world of monsters did not start from nothing. They inherited thousands of years of survival wisdom distilled into instinct and imitation. When one human learned to chip stone into a sharper edge, another learned to do it better. Progress was not sudden, but it was relentless, guided by the quiet evolution of thought. They began to cooperate with purpose. Unlike any other species, humans used intelligence to create unity. A hunt was no longer a chaotic rush. It became strategy. Some would drive the herd, others would ambush. They learned to communicate not with words at first, but with gestures, sounds, and shared awareness. A look across the plains could mean life or death. Slowly, communication became more complex, each sound carrying meaning, each gesture a signal of intent. In those primitive exchanges, the first threads of language were spun. Intelligence found its voice. The more they thought, the more they imagined. They began to see the world not just as it was, but as it could be. They saw shapes in the stars, faces in the firelight, possibilities in the stones they held. The same imagination that helped them plan a hunt also allowed them to dream of safety, of abundance, of something beyond mere survival. This imagination was not weakness. It was the foundation of everything that followed. To imagine was to create the unseen, to bring order to the unknown. The beasts around them acted from instinct. Humans began to act from intention. As their minds sharpened, they also became aware of themselves. They began to see their place in the vastness of the world, recognizing both their fragility and their potential. This self-awareness carried a burden, but also a power. They knew fear not just as an emotion, but as an idea. They could anticipate it, avoid it, use it. Fear became a teacher rather than a master. It pushed them to adapt faster, think clearer, and plan further than any other creature could. Toolmaking became a mirror of their evolving minds. Each stone blade was a reflection of abstract thought, the ability to see not just what something was, but what it could become. A rock was not just a rock. It was a weapon, a tool, a possibility. That mental leap from perception to transformation was the birth of innovation. Every chipped flake of stone was a small act of defiance against nature's raw brutality. With each tool, they extended their reach, turning thought into action. Even death became a source of understanding. They began to observe patterns of decay, to recognize that life followed cycles, that everything that lived must also end. This awareness deepened their intelligence, grounding their survival in comprehension rather than reaction. They began to bury their dead, not only out of necessity, but out of recognition, a quiet acknowledgement of something beyond instinct. Their minds were beginning to explore meaning, purpose, and memory. In this unfolding awareness, humans started to build relationships not just with one another, but with the world itself. They read the landscape as if it were alive, understanding how rivers moved, how seasons changed, how animals migrated. They didn't just live in nature, they began to collaborate with it. Their intelligence allowed them to see themselves as part of a vast system, one that could be studied, influenced, and eventually shaped. As generations passed, intelligence became their defining trait. The physical giants of the earth still ruled the land, but humanity had become something greater. A species that fought with ideas instead of claws, with memory instead of muscle, with unity instead of isolation. Each new discovery carried the echo of countless ancestors who had learned through struggle and passed their silent wisdom forward. Thought had become their armor, imagination their spear, and awareness their guide through the wilderness of giants. The world that early humans inherited was not one of peace or mercy. It was a vast and unforgiving arena, where every living thing fought for its place in the order of survival. Nature did not care for fairness or morality. It moved with cycles of creation and destruction that spared no creature, no matter how strong or clever. For early humans, this balance was both their enemy and their teacher. Every sunrise was a reminder that life existed in delicate tension, where strength alone meant nothing without adaptability. In this brutal rhythm of existence, they learned that survival depended not on domination, but on learning to move in harmony with the chaos around them. The earth itself was alive with danger. Volcanic eruptions reshaped entire landscapes. Storms swallowed forests, droughts turned fertile valleys into barren plains. Gigantic predators ruled the shadows: saber-toothed cats, cave lions, dire wolves, and monstrous bears that could tear through bone like paper. Yet, as terrifying as the beasts were, the true threat came from the unpredictability of nature itself. A shift in climate could wipe out herds. A fire could destroy shelter and food. In this ever-changing world, those who survived were not the strongest, but the ones who could bend without breaking. Humans began to realize that survival was not a battle to be won, but a balance to be understood. They started to notice that the same storm that destroyed their shelters also brought new water to the rivers. The same predators that hunted them kept other animals from overrunning the land. Everything, even death, played a part in maintaining the fragile order of existence. This understanding grew not from philosophy, but from experience. Every encounter with danger was a lesson written in blood and memory. Adaptation became their greatest instinct. When the cold came, they learned to cover their skin with the hides of beasts. When food became scarce, they learned to follow the migrations of animals, to gather roots, to store what little they could find. They discovered that survival was not about resisting nature, but about listening to it. The early humans who thrived were those who could read the signs, the change in the wind, the flight of birds, the patterns of the stars. Nature spoke a silent language, and only those willing to learn it could endure its tests. But adaptation came at a price. To survive, humans had to change themselves, not just physically, but in mind and spirit. They became more cautious, more strategic, more communal. They learned that no one could face the dangers alone. The balance of nature demanded cooperation. Each person played a part, and the tribe survived as one or perished as many. Through this cooperation, empathy began to take root, not as a moral choice, but as a survival mechanism. To care for others meant to strengthen the group, and in strengthening the group, one ensured their own survival. The natural world also taught them humility. No matter how much they learned, how many tools they made, or how far they traveled, they remained small in the face of nature's vastness. One mistake could undo generations of knowledge. A sudden freeze could end entire clans. This humility did not weaken them. It sharpened their respect for the world around them. They began to see that every living thing, from the insects crawling under rocks to the predators in the night, had its role. This realization slowly became part of their identity, shaping how they hunted, gathered, and lived. In this harsh world, death was not seen as an interruption, but as part of the great cycle that sustained life. The fallen animal became food. The burned forest became soil for new growth. Even the dead among them were sometimes buried with offerings, as if to acknowledge that they, too, returned to the earth that had given them life. Such awareness did not come from comfort. It came from centuries of struggle, from watching the endless exchange between life and death, creation and decay. Seasons changed, species vanished, and new threats arose, yet humans endured. They did not conquer nature, they adapted to its moods. When giant beasts disappeared, they found smaller prey. When the forests turned to plains, they changed their tools and methods. Their entire evolution became a reflection of the Earth's shifting balance. Each challenge reshaped them, making them more observant, more innovative, more aware of the deep, unspoken law that governed all living things: adapt or die. As time went on, this understanding became instinctive. They began to build their lives around the cycles of the moon, the movement of the sun, and the migration of animals. Their rituals and early beliefs mirrored the rhythm of the natural world: birth, death, renewal. They worshipped the sun for its warmth, the rain for its mercy, the beasts for their strength. Even in fear there was reverence. They no longer saw themselves as outsiders in nature's story, but as a part of it, bound to the same laws as everything else that breathed and blood. This balance was the true essence of their survival. The world of monsters had not been defeated, it had been understood. The early humans who lived through it did so by becoming part of that world rather than trying to escape it. They learned to live in the spaces between danger and safety, between scarcity and abundance, between fear and courage. Their endurance was not the triumph of power, but the triumph of adaptability, the quiet realization that life could only continue when it learned to move in step with the rhythm of the earth.